Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Paul, and today I'm talking to Andreas Antonopoulos, the voice of Bitcoin. Now, we've talked before for my book, The Crypto Factor with Blaise Matai, but today we're going to ask a few new things to Andreas for The Crypto Factor Volume 2. Andreas, thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome, Paul.
So, Andreas, I need to ask you, who was Andreas Antonopoulos before Bitcoin, before all this started?
So I'm a computer geek. I grew up around computers, got my first computer before I was 11 years old, and taught myself how to program from the manual that came with it, and grew up in Greece and was always fascinated with computers. Eventually ended up going to college in London, at the University of London, UCL, and studied computer science and got my master's degree in data communications. All of this happened long before Bitcoin. I was involved in information security and distributed systems. So when Bitcoin came along and when I finally bumped into it, I was ready for it.
So all this takes quite a lot of studying, quite a lot of, it probably has a lot of expectations, if you will, to get into computer science, to get into programming. What did it actually take to be able to get into this?
Well, I mean, it depends by what you mean get into this. Obviously, for me, it took 25 years of working with computers because that's my passion, but not everybody who gets involved with Bitcoin or interested in Bitcoin has to have a computer science background or a coding and programming background. Just like, before Bitcoin, I studied internet technologies and computer protocols, network protocols, TCP/IP, HTTP, etc. That was part of my university education. Not everybody who uses the internet needs to understand these things, of course. But if you're working as an engineer on the systems, or in my case, working to help educate people on how the technology works, then you obviously need to have a background in some kind of computer engineering, software engineering, computer science discipline.
Got it. Okay, so what drove you to become who you are? Because there's a drive behind it to get you to that stage. I mean, you said it wasn't easy. Obviously, it's not easy. But what drove you? What was the driving force behind it, if you will?
Well, I mean, I've always had a fascination with technology. Even before I got involved into computers, I was fascinated by mechanical and electrical things. I'd take apart all of my toys. I'd dismantle radios and toasters and things like that. I'd probably already received several electric shocks by the time I was 10. And I didn't always reassemble these appliances. I took them apart, but I wasn't always able to reassemble them. But I was fascinated by how things worked on the inside. And of course, computers kind of bring that to the ultimate level because computers allow you to program them in ways that are limited only by your imagination. So it opens up the ability to build something in a symbolic language, a programming language that is only limited by your imagination. So that's fascinated me as soon as I got involved in that. When I got my first computer, and I just spent thousands and thousands of hours learning how to program and playing around with these things and getting deeper and deeper and deeper involved into these things.
Nice. We're going to be talking about, by the way, we're going to be talking about your success, how you got where you are, and we will get into Bitcoin as well. I'm just saying that for the viewers. As for computers, I used to put together a 380DX or 380. Oh, but I can't even remember where it was.
386 SX, yes.
I was back there where with a green. I had a black and white VGA. After I had my Spectrum sort of thing, the green thing, it was crazy. I used to be into it. I used to sell them though, but I used to really be fast. But they just go too hard. It just okay. So let me ask you this: have you had failures in your life? And how do you handle them?
Oh, of course. Yes, absolutely. I mean, failure. So first of all, I've been self-employed almost my entire life. I think I've been working since I was 15 years old, in little jobs at first and then professionally. And so that's 30 years. And in 30 years, I've worked for somebody else for a sum total of 2.5 years for two different employers. The rest of the time I've been working for myself. So I've started a lot of businesses. I've tried out a lot of projects. I've hired people. I've fired people. I've built businesses up and failed many times in many different ways. Um, and I mean, everybody does. It's only a matter of whether you are willing to, are able to learn something from that. I've been very lucky in my life in that I've had the opportunity to fail, because in order to be able to fail, you have to have, a support system. You have to be above a level of poverty where you can feed yourself, so that even if you fail at your job, you're not going to starve to death. But I've been very lucky in that my failures have been always back to a level where I have some level of support where I can start again in a way that's not destructive. But failure is part of being an entrepreneur. It's part of being self-employed, and so that's been a constant theme throughout my life. Now, of course, the trick is hopefully fail in different ways and not the same way every time, because if you fail in different ways, at least you learn some lessons and don't fall for the same problem again. And gradually learn and develop experience. And that is the only way to be self-employed or entrepreneurial.
I guess if you keep on failing at the same thing over and over, you're doing something wrong over and over, right?
Well, you're not learning. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And I gotta ask you this: as an entrepreneur, by the way, real quick, did you have trouble working for other people? Because, and I'll tell you why. A lot of entrepreneurs I've interviewed, including Patrick Bet-David, they don't like working for, or couldn't work for other people. Did you have that notion or that feeling?
It's not that I couldn't work for other people. I have worked for other people, and I work well with other people. I don't have problem. I don't have a problem working for other people. And obviously, even if you're an entrepreneur, I mean, you have clients. You have to be able to adapt and compromise and negotiate and find ways to understand other people's expectations and negotiate and things like that. So I didn't have a problem working with other people. It's just that in many cases, I prefer to have more control and flexibility, so that if I made decisions and they were the wrong decisions, at least they were my decisions. And I ultimately had more control over which direction I'd go. And I really like the flexibility that comes with being self-employed.
Got you. Andreas, what does success mean to you? Because it means different things for different people.
I think that's changed over time, right? So when I was younger, I think success was defined as being able to achieve certain milestones in my life, like going to college, graduating from college, finishing the next exam. Up until a certain point, life is very structured and success is very clearly defined. And then you exit from that process, and then you just have a vague live goal, which is undefined and unending. And that's actually quite difficult. That transition from having a series of predictable, structured goals, the next year in college, the next year in school or whatever, the next exam, and then suddenly finishing all of that and getting to a point where you have to set your own goals is actually quite jarring, I think, for everyone. It certainly was for me. I did, early on in my career, I think I defined my success more about being able to build kind of security, financial security for myself, job security, feeling satisfied in my job, doing things I like to do. Now I define it a bit more differently. So I think being able to get to a point where I have purpose in what I do, and that purpose is what I define as success. So my purpose at the moment is to help educate as many people as possible in as many places as possible, as many languages as possible about this particular technology that I'm interested in, which is open public blockchains like Bitcoin and others, and help people understand the impact that's going to have on the world, and help educate people and help them see whether this might be a good thing for them to get involved in, and explaining that technology. So that's the purpose. And I feel I'm successful if I can reach more people and help explain these topics to more people. So I define success in those terms now.
That's also a purpose, though.
Yes, exactly.
Have a purpose. They define success financially or family or whatever, but they don't have a purpose. You actually have a purpose, and that's not promoting, but spreading Bitcoin, educating people on Bitcoin, and so forth. Correct?
Well, yeah, and again, I think that's also a matter of that's also a matter of time, meaning that in order to be able to seek professional fulfillment and find the specific purpose, etc., you have to already have a certain degree of basic security. So if you think of it in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need food and shelter first, physical security, before you can start thinking about entertainment and self-actualization and higher goals. So I think the same thing applies to a professional career. It's fine to say, having a purpose or a goal in life that's not financial, but that's easy to say if you can feed yourself. If you can't feed yourself, you're not going to really have time to think about whether you have a purpose.
And on that note, okay, do you think anybody can succeed financially to get out of poverty, to become something?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think that it very much depends on a lot of circumstances that most people can't control. I think that the people start life in an enormous range of circumstances, and it's very easy to say, hey, look, I've succeeded, therefore that's due to my hard work and perseverance. That's confirmation bias, selection bias, and survivor's bias all working together to tell you that, yeah, of course, these started, I grew up in a middle-class family in Greece, the child to two college-educated parents who had the financial means to help support me through both school and college, and I was able to take the time to get an education instead of working in the fields. So, it's easy to say I worked hard. The truth is that several, hundreds of thousands of other alternative versions of myself work just as hard and are still working in a field or whatever. So I don't think everybody can achieve success. I think a lot of it has to do with chance.
But at the same time, there's people that got out of the ghetto, people becoming billionaires from India online. Would you say?
Yes, that doesn't change the fundamental fact that the vast majority of your outcome is determined by circumstances outside of your control. I don't believe in the idea that anyone...
I agree, but do you think there's a certain mindset that goes with that?
The mindset is pointless if you're trapped in a hopeless situation. I think that's survivor's bias, meaning that you can identify that in the narrow sample of people who have succeeded, but that's not a determinant to success. That's just one contributing factor. Okay. You can have all of that and still fail miserably.
Very true. I wasn't specific enough because, okay, if you're born in Africa and you have no chance of doing anything, at least it's a lot harder. What if we take middle-class families in general? Surely a lot of people not from the middle class didn't succeed to become who you are, for example, right? And some people succeed maybe even more. It's so what I'm trying to see is, do you believe there's a driving factor, or is there a driving factor to success, if you will?
Yes, as I said before, I think that's a small contributing factor. Certainly, it is necessary, but it is absolutely not sufficient. There are so many other things that play a role. I don't believe we live in a society that is meritocratic or egalitarian in any way, so that the circumstances play a much bigger role than your personal drive, ambition, hard work, all of those things. Yes, you need those. But you can have those in spades and still fail miserably because of things you can't control. And most people do. I mean, that's I really want to see a world in which everyone has a chance to succeed, but I don't think we live in that world. I think the reality is much different.
I think it's also how you handle things, though, how you keep on thriving, how you keep on moving, if you will.
You can keep going in this circle, Paul, and I'll keep disagreeing with you every step of the way.
I was actually about to say that. It was just okay.
Yeah.
So
it's unfortunately, one of the things about that is that it's psychologically convenient and also comforting to think that that is the case, because then you don't have to face the role that chance plays and how random life is, and that but for the roll of the dice, you could be in a completely different situation with all of the same skills and drive and motivation.
True. It's true. And luck does play a big role. I got very lucky as well in my life. Many times. I also got very unlucky in my life, by the way. Just for a quick example, I was fighting cancer a couple of years ago, right? I didn't know if I was going to live or die. While I was fighting cancer, I wrote 2 books, and I also started studying and learning so I could not start from zero when I became better, because I saw my kingdom crumbling. So after that, when I got better and everything, which was a big thing, when I came back from Poland to Greece, I found out that my sister and my mother had cancer. My sister died. She didn't make it. My mother is still fighting cancer. My dad just got out of hospital yesterday because he had a heart attack and his lungs filled with water. All this, a little bit before that, my house was burning down in Quineta, so with the fires. So the thing is, though, while all this is happening, while I'm taking care of him, I'm still trying to educate myself, learn, work, and succeed, if you will, for my goals. A lot of people don't have that same mindset. Now, at the same time, when I did fight cancer, before I got cancer, I was lucky enough to have made money, and I did make it. It's a long story anyway. It's for another video. But I understand what you're saying. Chance and luck does play a very, very important role, and but it does not mean people shouldn't try to. Opportunity meets preparation, if you will.
Well, so here's the way I think of it more specifically. I'll give you a metaphor that I think helps clarify this. Imagine you're sitting in a canoe and you're going down a very, very big rapid river full of whitewater rapids. Right? You know, whether you're going to end up on this side of the river or that side of the river is determined by forces much bigger than you, and these forces are much more powerful than you. And you're going to get thrown around by the waves, and maybe 95% of it is going to be determined by sheer luck, and lots of very capable canoers will have died on that river. Then the question becomes, should you paddle or not? Yes, you should paddle. Just because that might change only 0.5% of the outcome doesn't mean you should just lie back and say, take me where you want, river. You should paddle, but don't for a moment fool yourself into thinking if you get to the safe side of the river that you did that through paddling. Or say, well, I was rewarded because I was a better paddler than all those people who drowned. That's the analogy I think
Got
of.
you.
You paddle because, yes, it might have a small effect and you might make a small change in your trajectory, but I think it's dangerous to believe in the idea that when you get somewhere, that it was all due to the paddling. No, most of it was due to random chance. One rock, one molecule of water in a different direction, and you would have been in the bottom of the river too. So again, that's my philosophy of life. Not many people agree with that, maybe, but that's what's driving me. In fact, part of defining success, and I think one of the reasons I'm interested in technologies like Bitcoin and creating a more just and open society where people can succeed, is because I want to minimize those chance factors, meaning that being successful, I look back and think of all of the alternative versions of reality or all of the other people who had the same drive, motivation, goals, and situation as me, and just through sheer luck ended up not as lucky, didn't survive, or whatever. And, part of what drives me is the idea that I want people to have a better chance at happiness, stability, security, success in life. And I believe we can make a world where chance plays a much smaller role and where people have more opportunities to really achieve their potential. I think there's an enormous amount of human potential that goes wasted in the world. And I would love to live in an environment or in a world where meritocracy applies, or where people have an equal chance, or where sheer drive, determination, creativity, and intelligence could get you somewhere. And even if you didn't have those, you wouldn't end up in the gutter because society would care enough not to. But we don't live in that world. And so part of what drives me is the idea that perhaps we can build a world that's closer to that, but not for a moment would I be deluded enough to think that that we do live in that world, or that the things that I've achieved through, my drive, determination, creativity, and intelligence. Those were contributing factors at best.
Okay. So did you have to make sacrifices to get where you are? Did you lose things, maybe friends, maybe a certain lifestyle that you wanted or that other people had?
I mean, for every door you open, you close another door. So life is full of choices and trade-offs. I don't think you can have everything. But I'm happy with the choices I've made. I wouldn't consider them sacrifices or anything like that. I think I've been fairly lucky in the hand I've been dealt, and I like the choices I've made so far. And I think for every choice you make, or for every outcome that happens, there's something that you can take from that, something you can learn from that. So we'll see. Who knows?
Did you have any mentors in your life?
Oh yeah. I'm a big believer in the idea of mentoring. I've had many teachers, mentors, grown-ups, supporters, friends in my life who have strongly influenced my thinking, who have helped me overcome problems, who have helped me think about things in a different way, who have opened both my mind to new ideas and my life to new opportunities, given me chances, taught me things. And I always look for people who can teach me something new, who have a different perspective in life. And I always try to find mentors. I have people who mentor me in business today as well. I have people who help me think about the strategy of my business. I have people who mentor me in my emotional and mental health. And so, yeah, I strongly believe in that. If you find yourself in an environment where you're not learning something new and you don't have teachers around you, you need to change that environment.
Got it. Do you also, I know you read a lot of books, obviously. You write books as well. What are some of the favorite non-tech related books that you read?
So I do read a lot of books. In fact, one of the things that really changed things for me was electronic book readers, which allowed me to carry a lot more books with me and read a lot more, read faster and read a lot more. So I almost doubled my reading once I got my first Kindle. Back when the first one was released, I've had now 16 Kindles. And I use them until they die and then get another one. And I read about a book a week on average, sometimes a bit more. And anything from sci-fi to business to history to economics. If I want to learn a new skill or topic, I buy a book and I read it. I read books about how to do public speaking. I read books about how to run my business. I read books about how to do marketing. I read books about how to write books. Any skill out there. One of the first things I'll do probably to try a new skill or to improve on something is buy or find several books to read about the topics that I can learn something new. I also read a lot of sci-fi and novels, fiction, literature, all kinds of things like that. I'm a big sci-fi fan as well.
Yeah, me too. So, and you've obviously invested in yourself as well. Tell me, do you have any daily habits and morning rituals?
Well, one of the things that has been very helpful lately, and I didn't really get into this until late in my life, is making fitness a part of my weekly routine so that I'm healthier in my body. I used to be a typical geek, very much a couch potato and didn't move much. That's changed in the last few years thanks to the influence of one of the people in my life. And it's given me a lot more energy and strength, and that's also helps me with anxiety and stress. So that I also enjoy walking a lot and do that. But also trying to take time to engage in my hobbies and activities outside of work is important to me.
Which are?
Well, I fly planes. I'm an amateur pilot, so I'm trying to develop that skill. It's been difficult this last year, but I'm hoping to do quite a bit of training in the near future, working towards an instrument rating for my flying activities. And yeah, I mean, it's one of the things I really enjoy doing.
Nice. So what does a typical day look like for you? And then we're going to move on to a few Bitcoin questions. And
well, typical, my days are pretty flexible. So I work 7 days a week, or if I take a day off, it's usually a midweek day. So I usually work on weekends because I find it productive when I don't have calls and meetings. Usually I have 2 or 3 meetings a day when I have to, or interviews or calls like this. I have weekly meetings with my team so I can manage my businesses, and other than that, it's fairly flexible. I don't have a very rigid schedule. I'll tell you one thing that's very Greek about my habits. I take a 1-hour nap every afternoon.
You know, they say that really helps a lot.
It helps me.
I think it's in our genes too.
It may well be, yeah.
Not sleeping is just lying down, thinking, clearing your thoughts sometimes. It really helps a lot. You mentioned having business and being an entrepreneur. What else are you into, Andreas, if I may ask?
What do you mean by that?
Like you said, you have a few businesses.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're all related to the work I do in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and open blockchains. They're all related to that, from speaking to event management to publishing, and all of the stuff that swirls around that.
Nice. Okay, so I got a couple of questions about Bitcoin. What is the difference between Bitcoin back when you got into it, and now, like, what was Bitcoin 2011, Bitcoin 2019?
Well, I think the biggest difference is the fact that, there's two big differences. First of all, Bitcoin has gotten a lot stronger. Back when I got involved, when it was less than $10 a Bitcoin, and the market was very immature, there were very few places where you could trade it or use it. It was very, very difficult to get involved in Bitcoin. There were very few wallets. It required a very high level of technical expertise just to get involved. And the opportunities were very limited. Bitcoin is much stronger now. It's traded on hundreds of exchanges worldwide. There are hundreds of wallets that can manipulate it. The technology has matured tremendously. The wallets are better. The user interfaces are better. The opportunities to use it are better. The number of people who are trained and know how to use it has grown by 3-4 orders of magnitude. And it's gone through these cycles of growth and decline and growth and decline and growth and decline through its bubble cycles, and gotten stronger and stronger and stronger with each time. And so many negative things have also happened to Bitcoin that it's survived, that it carries all of these battle scars as an example of how resilient it is as a platform. So I think Bitcoin has grown and matured so much and has become so much stronger than when I first got involved. I remember in the early days, I was quite skeptical as to whether this thing could survive and how fragile it was and how easily it could be undermined. I really, really have far more confidence in its survivability nowadays. That's one thing. The other thing I think is that when I got involved, it was Bitcoin. That's it. It was just Bitcoin. Now we have this explosion of not just competing systems, but parallel systems, an entire environment of open public blockchains with lots of different uses, applications, and differentiation, specialization has exploded onto the scene. Now, a lot of those are junk. Because it's a big competitive space, there's opportunities for all kinds of shenanigans. And a lot of it isn't serious or relevant or interesting. But some of the things that have emerged are serious and interesting and worth studying. And, we have a whole class of virtual machine-based smart contracts platforms for blockchains, whether that's Ethereum or the many other variants of that for Rootstock, et cetera, et cetera. And we also have a number of platforms that are doing things like prediction markets and timestamping and document verification and things like that, all of which are interesting applications as a whole, but they're also differentiating. And then there's a whole slew of privacy-focused systems that are developing zero-knowledge proofs and various systems like Monero and Zcash and things like that. All of these are very interesting. And what's important is that this now has become an ecosystem. It's not just Bitcoin. Bitcoin still has a very important role in the ecosystem, and it's still kind of the granddaddy of them all and remains the only viable contender as a kind of reserve currency, sound money, pure money system. But all of these other things in the environment around it are also growing, and there's a lot more experimentation and interesting research going on across the entire space. Then, at the same time, we have the emergence of additional protocol layers like the Lightning Network and applications being built on top of cryptocurrencies, which I think are fascinating. So much has happened, and so much continues to happen on a daily basis. And as soon as you stop thinking you're going to be surprised, something new comes along. Recently, I've been playing with things like Grin and Beam, which are implementations of the Mimblewimble protocol, which is a very interesting mechanism for both privacy and scaling of the blockchain data store. And that's fascinating too. So I think what we've seen is that this is now no longer just a single technical system. It's a whole ecosystem of technologies being developed rapidly in many different directions. And, you know, it's just fascinating to be in this space.
And that's where my next question was. So that's what Bitcoin was in the past and where it is now. What do you see Bitcoin becoming in the future? Because I actually saw some of your speeches, well, a lot of them, and we were talking about how internet, people thought it was email back in the day, and then it became a whole lot bigger. Where do you think Bitcoin is going?
I mean, that's an impossible question to answer, because most of the interesting applications for all of these technologies are not applications that we already have today, just done differently. So a lot of what you see in this ecosystem is people trying to redo websites, social media, logistics chains, marketplaces, e-commerce, banking, settlement, central banks, money, payment networks, all of these existing systems, redo them with open public blockchains. And to a certain extent, yes, there will be an impact from re-engineering existing systems and making them more decentralized, more open, more programmable. But the really interesting applications start when we go beyond that, when we stop looking at how we're going to reinvent the existing systems and we start building things that have not existed before and could not exist before because the technology didn't support them. So just like, you know, email is kind of like the postal service, only digitized, and you have a sender and you have a recipient and you have an envelope, and we use many of the same words, and it's e-mail, but we already had mail, so everybody understands how that works. Social media didn't exist. Twitter didn't exist. You know, many of the things we see now, like interactive video adventures like Netflix launched last week or last month, and things like that. These are more interesting things that perhaps didn't exist in that format before. So we've changed, you know, part of what happened with the internet, a lot of it had to do with the introduction of mobility and things like the iPhone, which changed the way we looked at communication and computing. And so those applications are not simply what we had before, only done differently. They're things that never existed before because they weren't possible. So I think one of the most interesting things that happens with technologies like Bitcoin is when we start inventing new applications that didn't exist before. Part of that is going to happen because we'll start exploring the realm of microtransactions, the ability to do very, very small transactions very, very fast, faster and smaller than we ever thought possible, and certainly faster and smaller than current technology can do. So in the traditional financial system, we talk about microtransactions as transactions that are maybe less than $10 or maybe that less than $1. What I'm talking about is transactions that are a tenth of a penny, a thousandth of a penny, and transactions that are done thousands of times a second, maybe tens of thousands of times per second. And these are really machine-based payments. These are not person-to-person. These are machine-to-machine payments where a machine is interacting with the world through a monetized payment system at speeds that are unimaginable to humans. That changes money. Money becomes a machine protocol, not just a human-to-human protocol. And I think the applications that come out of that are astonishing, and we haven't even started tapping them. And that's just what I can imagine right now. But there's a lot of things that simply we can't imagine right now because
you throw in AI in the mix, if you throw in machine learning in the mix.
Who knows? Yeah, it's impossible to even imagine what the applications might be.
Okay, Andreas, I know you're pressured for time. Do you have time for 4 more questions?
4 more? Well, let's do 2.
So you can answer them quick.
Okay.
Okay. What is an important thing about Bitcoin you wish people knew, but they don't? Like talking to a lot of people, I mean, you know what I mean? Most people.
I think the most important thing to understand about Bitcoin is that it's a technology, not an investment. It can be an investment too, but the really interesting thing is that it's a technology. And it's a technology that supports a variety of applications like the internet. And, the most important thing about this technology is that it doesn't have a central actor. It removes intermediaries. It doesn't have someone in control who can change the thing and make it suitable to serve their own profit motives. I think that's really the key to this technology. And that's why it's different from all other forms of money systems we've had before. But it's very difficult to explain that concept because most people have grown up with one form of money they've always known, which is government money, where there is a central actor. In fact, there's several central actors like governments, banks, payment companies, etc. And they, for the most part, control this system. So it's difficult to perceive that you could have an alternative when there is no such thing. That idea that trust, instead of having trust in an institution, you can have trust in a mathematical construct, which we call consensus in Bitcoin, is very difficult to explain. And it's something that you don't really begin to understand until you've seen its applications.
Got you. Okay, I'm going to respect your request and do one more question, and then maybe we can do another video some other time in the future when when you have more time. Okay. So, what is one or two questions you wish people asked you but they don't?
That's a hard one. What are one or two questions I wish people asked me?
Reporters, people in the street, doesn't matter.
I think one of the key questions that I think people should ask themselves more is, why does government money have value? Because one of the fundamental misunderstandings about Bitcoin is because people don't really think about why government money has value and where that value comes from. And if you are able to ask and answer that question, then you can understand more about what money is and how it works and why it might be done in a different way. The other thing I think that's important to think about is I wish more people thought about the implication that an open global money has not on Western developed countries. I think the real impact of this technology is in the developing world. And it's to cut across borders, cut across politics, cut across nations, races, religions, and economic classes, and provide the opportunity for the first time to have a system of money that people can choose or not to get involved in, to use, and that works for everyone, everywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. I think that's a very interesting concept, and most people don't realize why that might be useful or important. And the reason is because they've had money that more or less works most of their life. As a Greek, I experienced money that was broken at least twice in my childhood. And in many of the countries I visit and talk about this technology, they know what I'm talking about because they've experienced money that is broken recently. But it's very difficult to explain to some of the developed countries where Western societies that have working money, or where when money has become a geopolitical tool or weapon for trade wars and geopolitics, they're on the side that has power, and they don't get to see the impact on regular people that these abstract concepts like sanctions and embargoes and currency wars have on poor people around the world who have no understanding of why this is happening.
Got you. Nice. Andreas, is there any advice or anything you would like to add for the people watching right now?
Well, I just want to say that, I make all of my work available for free under open licenses online. So you can find, apart from almost 400 videos on my YouTube channel, which explain this technology in as many ways as possible, you can also find my books online, and you can read them, both my technical books. You can read and watch my videos, but you can also read my technical books like Mastering Bitcoin and Mastering Ethereum for free online if you want to learn about how this technology works.
Nice. Thank you so much, Andreas. I'm going to leave links to all of that in the description down below, as well as the new book, The Crypto Factor, which you are in. And thank you for that. And thank you guys for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about crypto, success mindset, and sales. And yeah, until next time, keep succeeding.